I suppose the epitome, of course, is the BBC News, which is one of the big ones I've done. And that was all about finding a sound that as soon as you heard it, wherever you were in the house, you'd know that it was time for the news on TV.
My name is Becky Wixon. I'm a music composer, a sonic strategist, and the co-founder of Balance the Mix, which is a non-profit that is working to make the music industry more fair and inclusive. I'm here with the iconic David Lowe, composer of the BBC News theme tune, amongst lots of others that I'm sure you will all know. And today we are going to be unpacking what is sonic branding, how does it work, and how could you get into it?
So how would you describe sonic branding then?
Sonic branding is the musical translation of a brand. So the way that a brand would have a visual identity, it has a logo often, a typography, a tone of voice, set of values. How do you translate that into sound? So sonic branding is quite a strategic approach. It's not just what sounds good, it's really what feels like the translation of the essence of who a brand is.
Well, I'd say, as a composer, I think you start with the feeling and the emotion, really. So you're trying to generate a sort of feeling in the viewer, which will attach them to the programme. And so it becomes familiar, instantly recognisable. As soon as they hear it, they get that little buzz, the programme's on. And, or it's that. And wherever they are, they might not be watching the screen at the time, but as soon as they hear that little burst of music or audio, whatever it is, they'll go, I know what that is.
And that's the magic, isn't it, of sound. It can be broadcasted, you can hear it. If you're making a cup of tea in the other room, you can't shut your ears.
Absolutely.
So it's a superpower, I think, for brands, and isn't always considered as part of a marketing mix. It's an interesting thing, I think, sonic branding, because it's actually been around for a really long time. You think about the origins of advertising jingles back in the 20s. I think the first one was Wheaties, a cereal brand. And those very stereotypical, catchy jingles. That was really the origin of advertising. But I think sonic branding has matured more recently than that. And if you think about now, some classic examples of sonic logos, for example, McDonald's whistle.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do all the examples.
Go on then.
The musician in the room. How about Netflix?
Is that the bong?
Ta-dum.
That's it. Ta-dong.
Yeah. Intel.
Dong ding dong ding.
Yeah, perfect. So instantly recognisable.
Absolutely.
Within a couple of notes. But that's not just sonic branding in terms of a logo. There's also any way that you would interact with a brand through sound. So Apple, great example, they don't really have a sonic logo.
It just goes bong when you switch the computer.
Yeah, open up your laptop, plug in your phone. It's got this kind of texture to it where you know.
Yeah, and funny enough, you don't really think of it as a piece of musical sound, do you? So it's like that is a sort of, it's music effectively, it's like a chord. But you don't really think, that's a musical chord, it's just a sort of bong. So it's pretty much the same with things like Skype, it goes doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, all those sounds.
Yeah.
They sort of originate as music, and even all the little clicks on your computer when you sort of email comes in, dong, and things like that. It's all from the same family.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that's the real epitome of sonic branding, and what it's become is this ecosystem of sound. That's really what a good sonic brand should be, that every touch point that you interact with a brand, it's consistent. You know that it's that brand, whether that's on the phone, on hold, whether that's a TV ad, the in-app sounds, UX, UI sounds, absolutely everywhere there is a consistency and you can recognise it.
Yeah.
That's the sign of a good sonic brand.
That's it.
So David, could you tell me about your personal experience of sonic branding?
Well, it's interesting really, because I suppose in a way that's all I've been doing pretty much for my whole career. But when I started doing it, you didn't really call it sonic branding. But it's always been about finding an identity for a programme. And I've always enjoyed that thing of doing little short bursts of music, like theme tunes, And so I pretty much focused on that for a long time and built up this little portfolio, and then the work's grown. And I've learned as I've done it, what works, what doesn't work as a sound, and what what's going to pull people in. And I suppose the epitome, of course, is the BBC News, which is one of the big ones I've done. And that was all about finding a sound. You know, that was the brief of the whole thing, was to find a very identifiable sound that as soon as you heard it, wherever you were in the house, you'd know that it was time for the news on TV. And it was also trying to find something different that stood out, that wasn't the same as all the other news programmes that had been around in the past and that were on other channels. It was just trying to find a very unique sound that could belong to the BBC, that would become the identity of the news, you know, the brand sound, which was 26 years ago now. And what's quite interesting is the way that it has, from that concept and from what I want this brand sound, it has emerged as this massive brand sound of BBC News, you know. And I get emails from people around the world, you know. I was talking to some people in Pakistan last week and they were, oh my God, the BBC News sound, it's just this sound, and how it's become this familiar thing for people. And I get some lovely, you know, letters, and there's one guy that said, it's very comforting when you're in a hotel somewhere abroad and you hear the BBC News sound, and it takes you home and it reminds you of home. And he was saying that he was actually in a war zone, and he'd flown over as a trainee reporter when he was in his early 20s off his own bat, and to some really dodgy place, and found himself in this hotel on the first night, and, you know, really alien environment and really scary. And then we put his little phone or whatever he had on, and there was a BBC News theme, and he thought, oh, there we go. So it really, that's the epitome of how a sound works and a brand works.
Yeah, and that's a lot of brand equity that's been built up over 25 years. That's a huge amount of time, and I think that's the real power of sonic branding compared to other composition in media, like advertising, which can be quicker moving. Maybe it's a cycle of a couple of months, maybe a couple of years, but sonic branding is intended to be long term.
Absolutely.
And that's the sign of a very good sonic brand, a long lasting sonic brand that stands the test of time. I feel like what's interesting with the BBC News theme is that you've done a lot of different adaptations, right? So you've got BBC World, BBC India, when you've got some Indian instruments coming in. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the first stage was to create the brand sound and find some core elements that you could constantly use, which was like the Greenwich time signal PIP, the deep beep beep, and then the fact that it was 120 BPM, you know. So a lot of it's been built around the fact that it's the time and the clock, and then there was a beat, which is the dong 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 dong, which has got a sort of very world flavour to it, because that's called Tresillo beat, which you hear in India, in America, South America, and Africa, all around the world. So there's core elements that I've used in the sound, and I've still got sounds in my system that I upload again that have been sitting there for 26 years, you know, and they become a staple part of the sound, you know, and so it's a case of building different variations of it for different programs that give them their own brand identity for a particular show. So like you say, it might be BBC India News. So it gives them their own distinctive feel of their own programme, but it also still is part of that overall BBC News brand. So it's been really fun, you know, creating all these different variations of it. I think there must be over 2,000 bits of music out there at the moment. I've got them all in this massive database on Dropbox, you know, for them to reference, and it's just like there's so many. I've lost count, really.
Yeah, but yet it's so recognisable, regardless of the changes. And I think my experience has been the more recent version of that, where I actually was doing music for a long time when I was a kid, and I think I unexpectedly got into sonic branding before I even knew what sonic branding was. Right. So my early experiences of composing in my teenage years, my brother is a games developer, and he was making these little games, and I was composing the music for his games at like 14. And the music that I made for this one particular game that just blew up, went viral, which has now had 9 different versions of this same game, topped the App Store, it's had over 1 billion views, used this little plinky plonky melody. The game is called Duck Life, so it's kind of a kid's game that's meant to it's be cute, and it's about ducks, and you raise the ducks. And I wrote this melody, which has then been amended every single time, changed, but that same core melody was there in different genres, different tempos, different flavours, but the heart of it is there. And so I kind of started there, and then at university, I actually went to business school. I studied business, but was desperate to get music into my degree somehow, which is where I came across sonic branding as an academic school of thought. So I wrote my dissertation on sonic branding, got a first-class degree, and then after graduating, realised that maybe I could get a job in sonic branding. That's really cool. But at the time, it wasn't really a career. That there weren't too many agencies that existed. Massive Music was one of them. I actually interviewed Paul Reynolds for my dissertation, called him up after the degree and said, "Can I have a job, please?" We haven't got any. We've only got 5 or 6 people at the office. And since then, over the last kind of 10 years or so, the industry has really expanded. And I actually ended up working at Massive Music, where there really is a method to sonic branding. And the industry has definitely grown up, I would say, to having a process, having a tried and tested method of steps to get through from that very early kind of concept to the delivery.
Absolutely. So what if in brief, how would you describe those steps?
So the very early stages, it's often a brand that says, we want a sonic brand. We don't know where to start. And so the early stages of a sonic branding project is very much about exploring who that brand is. So we would do an internal and an external analysis to begin with. So what are the brand's assets? What are their logos? What's the tone of voice? What do their internal stakeholders have to say about the brand? What do they feel about it? What about their audience? How do they feel about it? And then we look at the external analysis. So in their competition, what do any other brands have sonic identities? Is there a white space that they could occupy? If their competitors do have a sonic brand, what do they sound like? How can we stand out? So it's quite a lot of analysis to begin with, a lot of kind of learning and listening and trying to figure out how we could represent the heart of a brand through sound. So that's kind of first phase. And then when we've figured that out, usually there's some kind of concept, some kind of North Star that really feels like, okay, this is what we want to represent, the story we want to tell through sound, that if we can nail that, we can translate this brand into music and sound, at which point it becomes a brief. So that's the kind of thing that a composer like you would receive. And usually that's after months of work that's come before that, the research, the analysis. There'll be a strategist that's involved. So I've done both production and strategy in those roles where I'm absorbing all this information from the brand guidelines to the employee stakeholder interviews to the competitor analysis and going, okay, where's this nugget, this golden nugget that we want to try and represent? And then translating, I think that's the real skill, I think, in branding, is being able to translate the marketing speak that the brands are talking into music. I think most of the best sonic logos and sonic identities are really simple, but they are subconsciously communicating something that you might not necessarily recognise straight away. Like McDonald's, the whistle, that's kind of suggesting joy, and lightness and a kind of fast food and then we've got Netflix example that we talked about, that drum, that sense of anticipation, you're about to be entertained, and that's in 2 seconds, and it's a challenging thing.
Absolutely, and it really is a challenge to find something
so short.
So short, yeah. The one that I quite like is WeBuyAnyCar.com, because all it is that marimba that goes dun 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 dun, and it's so simple, but it sort of says simplicity. That's what we're about. Easiness, and informality and a bit of humour attached to it. It makes you feel, dun, 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 and it's instantly recognisable.
But, I think a lot of people are quite surprised at how much thought goes into those 2-second pieces of sound.
Absolutely.
You know, and it, like we say, it is quite a challenge to take something as huge as a brand identity with all of their stories and essence and goals and personality and audience and all of it, and translate that into a 2-second piece of sound. You know, the most successful composers that I've seen in that space are those who really understand the strategy behind the brief, compared to other forms of composition for an ad or a game or a TV show. Sonic branding is quite different for the reasons we've discussed. It needs to be reflecting the brand essence. It needs to be strong enough to live for a long time. You know, it definitely requires a composer who has the ability to think a bit more psychologically, a bit more strategically, to be thinking of the meaning behind every choice that you're putting into a piece of work. Does this timbre say something about the brand? What about this melody? What about this tension that I'm adding? You know, so I think if you're a composer wanting to get into the space and you have an interest in psychology and you have the ability to understand a brand, even if you haven't been educated in that, you can educate yourself. You know, learn about brand strategy. What is a tone of voice? What are brand guidelines? How would you understand and translate typography in a logo into sound? So I definitely would recommend upskilling in those areas.
Yeah. So of course, there's a lot of composers out there, a lot of songwriters, a lot of people coming out of university, probably wondering, how do you actually get into sonic branding as a specialism?
I think there's a few ways to get into sonic branding. There's a lot of specialist agencies these days. So I've worked at or collaborated with a lot of them, Massive Music being one that's been around for a while, DLMDD being a newer competitor. So if you can find particularly producers that are working at these agencies, they're always on the hunt for fresh talent. So I would say to reach out to, whether it's on LinkedIn, going to networking events, finding the people that are working at these agencies, because they are the ones that are looking for people to join these briefs. Building relationships, I think, is really important. Not necessarily just with sonic branding agencies, but it could also be with creative agencies generally. Don't be afraid of a cold call, cold email. They do work. You might not got every response straight away, but it's definitely a strategy that works and helped me at the start of my career. So finding creative agencies that specialize in branding in particular can be a good method. And then also going direct to the brands. I think these are the three main methods. The sonic branding agencies will be receiving briefs either from creative agencies or from the brands. Creative agencies are working with the brands, and the brands, you're going direct.
Absolutely.
So I think put a portfolio together. If you haven't done any sonic branding work, I would say to make some fake work. There's no harm in proving your chops, and I think quality will always be clear when somebody hears it. So get yourself a website, get yourself a portfolio, and start networking.
Absolutely.
So what about the finances behind sonic branding? If you're a composer at the start of your career, or maybe you're an artist that wants an additional income stream, what can they expect from sonic branding?
I guess it depends what it is, but if you get obviously like a good one, that's on a lot, then it can be significantly good from the income point of view. Because it's on all the time, it's generating royalties all the time. And it's because it's there, designed to be there for a long time, that income stream is going to carry on. So if you get a good one, but that's repeated a lot and used a lot, then it can be a very good source of income, yeah.
Yeah, and also upfront fees and demo fees. Yeah. So working with some of the agencies, you will get paid for your demos. Usually it's a lot less than the win fee, but you're getting paid for your time. So the way that the pitch process tends to work is if you're selected to work on a project, you'd be pitching amongst, tends to be between kind of 5 and 7 other composers, and you'd get a demo fee for that initial pitch. If you're then chosen to go forward into a latter round. Usually at that point it's kind of 2 or 3 composers. You tend to get what's called a development fee. So again, you're getting usually kind of £300 to £500 tends to be the demo development fees. But really, if you win, that's where it can really pay off. And we're talking in the kind of tens of thousands sometimes. But as you're saying, the long-term potential, that's the magic of sonic branding. This isn't an ad campaign that's going to have its cycle for a couple of months and then that's it. BBC News has been going for 25 years, you know, and I think that's the magic of our industry. You know, it's copyright is passive income. It really is quite magic, and so I think that really is the sparkle of this. If you can get those placements and they live for a long time, then you're laughing.